here's some trivia for you. What popular Canadian-made series is in its 10th season, has given away thousands of dollars, and has never shot one scene in a studio? We hail the host next on Brio TV, the podcast. Hi there. Thanks for joining me. I'm your host, Bill Brio. And yes, the answer is Cash Cab, a franchise that has been in 40 countries with no version more popular than the one here in Canada. That has a lot to do with the affable host and my guest on this episode, comedian Adam Growe. He actually tested and obtained a cab license in order to host this series when it shot its first season back in 2008. And he had to renew it for season 10, which premieres Wednesday, April 22nd on Much and starts streaming the next day on Crave. The new season features a karaoke twist. Passengers who make it to their destination after answering various trivia questions can double their money by answering one more question and then breaking into song, which is like how many cab rides end without the cash prize. So hop in, seatbelts on, and say hello to our host behind the wheel, Adam Growe. Speaking, of course, with Adam Growe, who's the host of Cash Cab, now in its 10th season. That's quite an achievement. It's returning on April 22nd on Much, and April 23rd, you can start streaming it on Crave, and there's new episodes every Wednesday. So congrats on 10th seasons.
Well, I always kind of imagined when I would get a show that was really suited to my personality and to Canadians, easy, fun viewing interest. Because, of course, I'm like any other Canadian viewer of content that's out there these days. I love the scripted comedy and drama, but we all need the occasional good hit of just high density fun, which is Cash Cab. So to get 10 seasons has been really meaningful to me as well, because it's as fun as it looks when you watch it.
I bet it is. And honestly, Adam, I think this is the perfect Canadian television show. Like, I really think it could last forever. It would seem to be an efficient show to produce. It involves trivia. Canadians invented Trivial Pursuit. It just seems to work. I think you could do it all across in any city. It's a smart format. So all of that adds up, right?
Well, we did have a long hiatus, and so we are in season 10. But the reality is you're actually quite right, because it's lived in repeats all of this time. Yeah. For viewers across the country, and in fact, it's seen around the world, the Canadian version of Cash Cab. It's been in repeat, so they feel as if we've always been making it. Right. So their feeling and connection with the content and the contestants that they see in the back of my Cash Cab is that it's always been there for almost 20 years now. And so I hope that we can continue to make it. As far as making it in other cities, we did do the one season in Vancouver. All other 9 seasons have been in Toronto. And I would love to be in Edmonton or Ottawa or Montreal or Atlantic Canada or back to Vancouver. But the reality is, even though things have changed a lot in the almost 20 years since I first got my cabbie's license in 2008, it's a little bit more of a streamlined process to get licensed to be a driver of people as opposed to officially a taxi driver. But you do have to realize, and I had to do this for Vancouver, when you become officially licensed to do something formal like drive a cab, you have to have the provincial driver's license for where you're driving. Oh. And in Canada, you can only have one provincial driver's license at a time, unless you're just visiting for a short period of time. But that's for, regular people who are just going, I'm going to go, live in Vancouver for a month or whatever. When you're officially a licensed cabbie, I had to surrender my Ontario driver's license, get a special class of BC driver's license, do the whole road test and everything there, and then do the same thing again when I came back to do the next season in Toronto. So it's a little bit of a make work. So there's that part of it.
I never realized that. I mean, many, many years ago, I lived in Los Angeles. I was working for TV Guide and I'm talking 40 years ago when I started there, and I had an Ontario driver's license. I actually went and got a California license, but I don't think I had to like back then. I think it actually, even OHIP worked in LA back then when I was there. So, but I didn't realize you needed a Manitoba license to drive around Winnipeg or anything like that. So interesting.
Well, technically, I mean, I think like I went with my family in 2015 to live back in my hometown of Vancouver for a year. And we always were going just for a finite year. It was one of the most amazing decisions we made as a family to be with friends and family. But for that length of time, for a year, they did expect you to have a new license. Even though when I did the Vancouver version of Cash Cab in 2011, and I was only there for a summer, it's because technically I was doing something a little bit more than just driving around the city for, 3 months. I had to get a special class of license. So to do the show. And the other elements, Bill, that you got to think about when people say, you've got to come to Edmonton or you got to come to Ottawa. Ottawa I could do because I have an Ontario driver's license. Right. But Toronto and Montreal and a little bit of Vancouver are really, when I travel as a comedian. I'm doing my Adam Growe quiz show across the country. I do comedy and trivia together. And I've been touring as a stand-up for years, even before Cash Cab came along. Yeah. If you think about it, when you visit these cities, there's a different kind of culture when it comes to cabs in a lot of these communities. And especially now with rideshare, but even before the rideshare services, aside from Montreal, Toronto, and Vancouver, people don't hail cabs. They call cabs.
Right.
And so we rely on the hailing of the cab, and we are lucky that still, even to this day, in a big city like Toronto, people still hail cabs.
That's interesting. And also, you need to be able to go 25 blocks. It has to be a certain size, right? Otherwise, if you did Cash Cab St. John's, I'd watch that in a heartbeat. But you'd only be going to Water Street. There'd be very short drives, right?
Well, I mean, and no shade on any Canadian city, because I love the communities where I go and I perform. But, if you think about that, you could have a situation where I'm in Winnipeg. It's like, okay, I guess we're going down Corridon again, through Little Italy of Winnipeg one more time on the show or whatever. And that would be fun. Winnipeg's got great people. Winnipeg, the city loves culture and arts and sports. Yep. And like when I've performed stand-up in Winnipeg, it's been amazing because people go out all year long. But in terms of the limitation, in terms of the route, a lot of people love the personality of the route I take. But at the same time, if you go to George or Water Street in St. John, people will say, yeah, you could keep going back and forth because of the characters you're going to get in St. John, Newfoundland, right? It's like, that might work because of the personalities.
Well, you do see a lot of Yonge Street in Cash Cab in Toronto, and the new series, the new season is, as you said, is shot in Toronto. And I watched the first episode of the one that was provided, and noticed a few things. Did you always have a meter in your cab on the show?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, yeah. It's funny how I didn't realize that before. Don't get out yet. There's plenty more coming up with Adam Growe of Cash Cab. What's coming up this month on Paramount Plus Canada? Well, among other offerings, look for the 4th season of the fan favorite horror series From. Head on back to the nightmarish town that traps all who enter. In season 4, many mysteries await. Who is the man in yellow, and what does he want? Will Jade and Tabitha's revelation be the key to finally sending them home? How much longer can Boyd hold the town together? Season 4 will open doors that some in town will end up wishing had remained closed. The Shot in Nova Scotia series stars Harold Perrineau from Lost and an ensemble cast, many of them Canadian actors, including Ricky He from The Good Doctor. The series has a 96% Rotten Tomatoes score. Catch Season 4 of From when it premieres April 20th. And remember, there's a mountain of entertainment on Paramount Plus. Here he is again, Adam Growe. You mentioned you went to cab school. You actually trained. Was that in Toronto? And talk a bit about that. What do you learn? How to drive way out of the way so you make more of a fare? You know what?
Yeah, well, the opposite of that. And things have changed, Bill, since I first got my license. In the first 8 years of doing cash cab, when I had to initially get my taxi license in 2008 and then renew a few years later to keep it valid, municipal licensing services in Toronto, and every city is going to handle a little bit differently, but things have even changed in Toronto because of rideshare. So there's a lot of people who drive people that have now been kind of packaged into the same type of testing. So to renew for season 10, for instance, I did have to do a road test, and I did have to answer a bunch of questions and pass a lot of road safety and customer service, something very specialized for taking people around. But when I initially did it, there was much more detail in the classroom. It was a 2-week course. You had to pass the exam, and that was a lot of pressure. If you could imagine, when I had to first get my driver's license as a cabbie, there was not only the period of time that we had to reverse engineer before we were in production and actually trying to shoot the show. And when you know, and for people who watch television, it's not hard for you to imagine. There's a lot of cogs. There's a lot of moving pieces when you're going into producing a television show. So they're moving everything backwards to me going to school, officially getting the license. And then the last thing I had to do the day before we started shooting was I had to get over 75% on the final exam.
Wow.
And I was like, I haven't been to school in a long time. This is a lot of pressure. And my wife, Julie, is like, do not fail that exam. Like, and so obviously I passed. But then, nowadays there's no in-class stuff. It's all virtual aside from the road test. So there's a little bit more pressure there. And you do have to pass a road test. And I'd say a lot of people, even if you were just renewing your license, if you had to take this road test, and I believe everybody should be taking a similar type of road test if you've driven around, especially Toronto, there was stuff I knew because of being a cabbie that, to look in the mirrors every few seconds, spread that out. The instructor on the road test for season 10, when I had to get it, she didn't, tell me anything. She just, get in there, let's drive, and then I get the results afterwards. Actually, that was for Cash Cab Music, and it's still valid for season 10. But things are a little bit different now, but there was a lot of pressure. And so just very quickly, I want to circle back. You said something at the beginning in terms of cabbies, taking the long route to, add a little couple more cents to the meter. Technically speaking, your job as a cabbie is to go the most direct route between A and B, as opposed to the fastest route.
Okay.
So if someone gets in and hails a cab and says, I'm going here, my job is to go the most direct route, even if, there was congestion. If the passenger were to say, I have a better route, absolutely, I'll go whatever direction you want to go. Or you can say, look, this route is a little bit busier than usual. Would you mind if I go this way? So, you might say, oh, cabbies don't do that. Maybe, but I think that the cabbies that are trying to get a couple extra cents by going the long way around are, the minority. Most cabbies know the rules and the bylaws and what they need to do.
Well, especially as you say, ride share and everything makes it a little more competitive. And let's put this in perspective, like the show 10th season, but you've actually been driving this show since 2008, 18 years, right? So you've spanned the introduction of rideshare and different competitions. So that's different. And I wonder, when you get into a cab, do you ever get recognized by cab drivers?
Cabbies, I was really worried about it because most cabbies, especially when I was initially getting my license, let's be honest, they don't look like me. They don't have the same lived experience as me. There's not a lot in at least Toronto. There's not a lot of cabbies that have my social demographic, my cultural background. And so I was really worried that, this guy's making a TV show and all of a sudden he's a cabbie. They still to this day love Cash Cab because people hail cabs now and they want to play their own version of Cash Cab. They're a little bit more affable and likable with their cabbies. There's cabbies that have fun with it. They absolutely adore the show. It's great for the brand. And even rideshare people are doing that. So the culture of rideshare was a concern when we got the reboot 2 years ago for Cash Cab Music. Are people still hailing cabs enough? And then this recent, reboot after a couple of years of season 10 now, By the way, we're back to the OG trivia on season 10, but we've kept Cash Cab Karaoke as the double or nothing option at the very end. But the culture of rideshare hasn't taken away from the significant population of people that get surprised hailing a cab. And I'll touch on that quickly if you want to talk about it. The real culture that's changed in the last 2 or 3 years, at least on the streets of Toronto, and it was far more ahead in Vancouver, is bike culture. Bike lanes,
right,
and the very positive aspects of what in a big city, defined bike lanes can do to ease congestion and make for better city living. And I know there's been a lot of back and forth, unfortunately, in Toronto, but the bike culture is really fantastic. And I was more worried about that. It took me a little while to get used to navigating how to drop off people and pick them up. Technically, a cab is allowed to pull over and block a bike lane to pick up, but you're not supposed to stay there for any length of time. And of course, we're being very careful. Safety is a top priority. But the reality is, as the city gets better with bike culture, and there's more and more cyclists on the street in these designated lanes, cyclists are actually the best ambassadors for road safety across the board for drivers too, because people who cycle seriously, like on a daily basis, going to work, or that's their main mode of transportation when they're living in a big city like Montreal or Toronto or Vancouver. I was just in London, Ontario, and Hamilton, Ontario. Hamilton, Ontario's got a lot more bike lanes. Cyclists are more serious about personal safety for everybody than I think we are as drivers or pedestrians.
Well, they know they really have to keep their head up. It's you got to have it on a swivel all the time. It's can be dangerous. So
yeah, but not just for them. They share the culture of safety across the board, and that's why I think bike lanes just really change the whole. And it takes a little while to get used to it, right?
Yeah.
The big difference, and I'll say, is and I get that they're gig workers and they're trying to make a living. The problematic, micro mobility drivers are the scooters who are in a rush to deliver food or services, or even worse in my book. And I don't want to be throwing shade on people, but the illegal stand-up scooters, the stick scooters, with really no hope of turning and avoiding anything if you're going any sort of speed. Like, those are totally unsafe. They're actually illegal on the streets of Toronto, but they're everywhere. And those riders, I love the people, of course. You're all my people. I love you. But those riders are more likely to be the ones going up on the sidewalk, coming back down onto the road, not wearing a helmet, that kind of stuff. I could go on, Bill,
I bet, and I used to live in Brampton, and I remember when they introduced those and they became such a fad, they used to have 3 or 4 on just corners. Like, you could literally unhook and ride around. And I thought, does this make any legal sense? It doesn't seem to, right?
Well, that's what they say. I've got a lot of people in our family, like, my niece is a doctor, my step aunt is a doctor, my daughter's a nurse. And so of all the women who are working in medicine right now in my family, my dad's a retired doctor. They say that, they're in the culture of hospitals. The biggest injuries right now, Bill, can you guess the top 2 injuries? You know the one. You've just identified one of the biggest injuries. What do you think the second biggest injury, aside from scooter riders?
Maybe bicycles?
Pickleball.
Oh, especially people playing pickleball on a bicycle. I think it's
scooter
really
ball,
deadly, right?
Yeah.
Well, that doesn't surprise me. I guess people are thinking they can jump right into a competitive game, and really, they should have limbered up a bit first. I think that's the problem there. I'm curious, when you got your first driver's license, your general driver's license, how old were you, and did you get it on the first try?
I was epic, and I think that's one of the reasons that I got Cash Cab is my driving innate and the attention I put into driving. I got it as soon as I was old enough, started taking lessons late 15 years old, and got my license when I was 16 in Vancouver. Wow. And my dad and mom and stepmom said to me, look, you're only going to learn to drive once. Little did they know. I was going to be learning to drive multiple times in my adulthood. But they said, you only learn to drive once. So let's just do the best rated, the longest course. So we did Young Drivers of Canada. A lot of my friends were opting for schools that were shorter or cheaper. And so Young Drivers of Canada, even back in the 80s, was long classroom sessions and some take-home stuff, and then a lot of road, practice, and then a test. And so my driver instructor was so excited about my skills as a kid, as a teenager. He actually came, he was a hired gun, teaching me to drive. He thought I was going to ace it. He thought I was going to get like one of his rare 100%, they take demerits off on the road test for various things. And he's a big fan. I don't even know who he is. I didn't keep in touch with him. Obviously, I was just a teenager. But he was really disappointed because I lost a couple of points by having to try my parallel park twice.
Oh, wow.
So like the one thing that I got wrong on the whole driver's test was like a couple of demerit points. And that was like the one thing. So I just remember that's like imprinted on me. It's a core memory.
That's the hardest thing. So come on. I mean,
Yeah, I know. Well, you would think he would be a little bit more forgiving. So anyway, I can throw in a good parallel park these days. Don't worry.
I bet you can. I actually took lessons at the Etobicoke Driving School, which was built into the Westwood Theater in Etobicoke way back. And to me, the best part of it was the 16 millimeter films. I collect 16 millimeter films. So they would thread up a projector and show there was a guy, and his whole method of driving was honking your horn, like constantly, no matter if you see someone, honk your horn. And I just thought these kitschy films most of them from the 50s were hilarious. And then I got my license on the first try, but I did make one really stupid mistake right away. I went to back out and I'd had the parking brake on. And I had to stop and release it. And I thought, I've already blown it before we've even started. But the guy was forgiving. So that was that.
I think you're right that it does. You're under pressure and something slips your mind. And as long as it's not like something that's like written on the test as immediate fail. You can have a driver that's a little bit more compassionate. When I renewed in Vancouver, for instance, one of the things you had to do was a full inspection of the vehicle. And in fact, as a cabbie, you're supposed to do an external and internal inspection every single day you take out your car for the first time, checking the tires, looking at everything's firm. And so he actually complimented me once we got back in the car. He says, that was the most thorough external examination I've had in a long time from drivers. And just as we were about to leave, he goes, anything else? And I'm like, I really studied hard. I was like, in my mind, kind of like you with the parking brake going, I think I've got everything. But in fact, that was it. I didn't double check the parking brake. I didn't drive away with it, but it's ironic that both you and I had that one little moment.
Yeah.
He says he was trying to hit me. He wanted me to get it. This is years later. This is when I was an adult.
Funny.
He says, anything else, Adam? Anything else? And I go, I think I've got it. And he just wanted me to crank it up and put it back down to make sure that it was working, and I didn't do it.
Amazing. Wow. People often leave things in a cab. Have you ever had that experience on Cash Cab?
Well, that was one of the rare occasions. As you can imagine, most people want to play once I surprise them.
Right.
Even in the first couple of seasons when people hadn't seen the show, I could convince people to play. The first season was the only time when there was any sort of significant number of people going, I don't know, man. I don't, what's going on? Like the lights would go off and they go, this is very sketchy.
To scare people.
But I could convince most people, say, look, honestly, here's the money. You can actually win money, but it is a game show. And most people say, oh, okay. There were a few people who said no. And it wasn't until about season 3 or 4 that I got a couple of young women who were getting into the cab after seeing a concert at a venue downtown Toronto. And they had seen the show and loved Cash Cab by this time because it had been on the air. And they're like, oh, and I go, come on, let's go. And they go, we can't, one of them had lost their phone at the venue. Oh. And you know what phones mean. That's like social collateral. That is their life. And I said, I'll drive you there. And they're like, no, we won't be able to focus. And, they really wanted to play, but they actually said no because they had lost their phone. And so phones are something that a lot of people do leave behind in the Cash Cab. Yeah. They had lost it in a venue outside. But that's because once I surprise people and I get them to agree to play and they want to play and we pull away, they're only allowed to use their phones if they opt for the mobile shout out.
Right.
And so they have to put phones away. So sometimes they're on their phones when they get in, which is why it's easy to fool people because they're distracted. Yeah. But then they get nervous and they just put it down beside them or something, and it slips between the seat or something like that. So that's mostly what gets left behind. Even for the new element, we have the social media shout out, which is live on social media. They don't use their phones for that. I do that on my phone.
I noticed that. Yeah. And are you asking Alexa? Who is it you ask when you do that with the social media shout out?
It's wild, Bill. I've loved this element since we introduced it in Cash Cab Music, which is technically season 9, and we've kept it for season 10. You're going to love it. If you haven't seen it, it blows my mind because I'm in production in the Cash Cab. We're making the show in October, November, and then we give contestants an option of 3 shout outs. They can use 2. That's something new. They can only use 2 out of 3. And if they opt for, and this is back in October, November, in advance, months of advance before it actually goes there, I'm actually going live on my social media channel to get real people in real time to chime in with their guesses and support for the answers. So people on social media are going, what's going on? What is happening? It's like they're seeing it live and they're actually participating in the production of Cash Cab, which is a unique experience, I think, in all of television genres. When else can you participate in a production and then see your name and see if your answer gets used later on when the episode airs?
So if you're asking what was Charles Dickens' pen name, you're talking specifically live to somebody who is giving you their
Anybody who sees my live, they just start joining the live. People just join. So there there might be a dozen people. There might be hundreds of people.
Yeah, there was different answers. Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, anybody who sees that I'm live on social media can jump in, join the live, and key in an answer. And then the contestants can go, okay, Bill B from Toronto says Dickens. We're going to go with Bill B. And so people just love that. And people are fan mailing me going, when will that episode air? And I'm like, I don't know yet. You know.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
We'll be right back with Adam Growe at the next traffic light stop. Time once again to talk to Emily Gagne at Hollywood Suite. Emily, what do you got for us in this month of April?
Well, no fooling here, Bill. We have got lots of great comedies for people to watch this month, including classics like Animal House and Slapshot, even some Abbott and Costello. But we also have like some more modern silly faves like Billy Madison and Step Brothers and Baby Mama.
Okay, wait a minute. Abbott and Costello, give me a title.
Meet the Invisible Man.
Oh, I heard the Invisible Man will not be seen tonight.
That's what they say.
Yeah, I heard about that. Okay, well, do you have any series as well as movies?
Yes, we have a new series this month called The Guest. It's a UK thriller, and it's about a cleaner and her rich boss. It's kind of like that movie The Housemaid, but a full series.
Wow. And is Christopher Guest in The Guest?
I wish.
Yeah. Oh, well, can't have everything. Okay, that's kind of fun. We'll look forward to that in April. Thank you, Emily.
Thanks, Bill.
And we're back. And back when you were saying about some people don't want to go on the ride, did you ever get like a couple who were having an affair who just didn't want to be on camera? Like some people just that would be that would be the part we got to get out of here, right?
Well, I have a lot of occasions over hundreds of games in now 10 seasons where I suspect something like that was happening. I can only say for sure, and they never admitted it. I can only say for sure there was one incident where I was very confident that that's what happened.
Hilarious.
And I don't know for sure. I can't say for sure if the episode aired. I think it did. But what we did in that situation, I surprised 2 people who were getting in the cab. And, they were like, oh, because they know they're like, like this. And so what had happened was they explained, and I once I surprise people, I do stop cameras. So there's a little bit of a couple minutes where we sign waivers and have a bit of a discussion with people before we pull away from the curb, a little bit of TV land stuff. So they were like, no, we can't play. And I'm like, oh, what's the matter? But they didn't want to admit it. Yeah. So they just said, oh, it's not good. But the guy was a huge fan of the show. And he said, and so it was probably like season 4, season 5. And he's like, I really want to be on the show. We got to work it. And he convinced her. So anyway, I'll make it as short as I can, Bill. It appears that they were out for like a work social after hours,
right,
with a bunch of people from the office.
Nice.
They were at a bar having a social, and then the two of them just kind of ducked out and left. So the rest of, whoever was left from the office was still inside socializing. They hail a cab, they get in, they're like, oh, no. And so he says to me, I really want to be on the show. Can we go grab one more person or 2 more people from inside? So then now I let that happen because he's a fan of the show. I did legitimately surprise them.
Yeah.
So he wanted to play. So that's how he got around it so he could be on the show. So now it was a group of workers leaving that social, getting into the cash cab. So what we did is I gave them a bit of a break. And this is a little bit of TV land for the people who want to be on cash cab, randomly hail the cab. I surprised them. I let them rehail with the 4 of them and play the game.
Wow. Okay.
Instead of it being guys. So that's what he never said, or she never said, like, obviously they were consenting adults doing whatever they were doing. They never admitted it, but they had a real sly look in their faces.
Well, and there you have it. Adam Growe doing your part for marital fidelity.
Oh, no, I didn't know you were going to turn it around to that. I'm not supporting that. I'm just supporting the fandom.
It's all in fun. Listen, is there always another? Is there a camera car that follows you around all the time? Is that part of the deal?
Yeah, there's a small production crew that follow me around at all time, and they can hear and see everything. And I've got a director in my ear to make sure that we got all bases covered. And so there's occasions where they can hear everything, and I'm just kind of trucking along. And he might say there was an audio blip when you went over that storm sewer or the speed bump. We got to re-ask that question or whatever. So there's a production crew that follows around, and then there's a DOP, a director of photography. The term, but lay people will not know that there's a camera person, as you can imagine, because there's a lot that needs to be captured externally.
Yeah,
and he works what's called either guerrilla or dirty, right? So he's filming from the follow vehicle from a distance, and then as soon as I pull over a hill, he's like safely getting out behind and capturing as much as he or she can. We've had men and women on the DOPs, and so there's that element happening in terms of the small crew that follow.
Yeah, they do a great job. The karaoke idea obviously started with cash cab music, but I'm really intrigued. Like, it's fun, and I've seen that one episode of the new show. Really is fun to watch. But do you have to pay royalties for the music? How does it work?
Yeah, and so that does limit us in terms of the wide range of music that we can use. You do have to pay royalties, and you can only get access to a certain amount of time. I think it's about 10 to 20 seconds.
That makes sense, because you had a Backstreet Boys song in that one episode, I think, which can't be cheap.
Yeah, and so basically the production house, Castlewood Productions, has been making the show since the beginning. Castlewood makes the show for Bell, and Castlewood puts in their budget X amount of dollars for the royalty rights for the songs that we want to use for Cash Cab Karaoke. And then depending on the label or whoever owns the music that we're looking for, that we're reverse engineering, going, these would be great songs. Can you imagine this song being sung? You have to negotiate. And so there's different rates and there's different lengths of time. So it gets really complicated. And what happens is, and this might be a little bit more meta, but if you can imagine, there's in the budget, we can't just buy everything and have everything waiting there. Once you pay the royalties, you can't just kind of like say, oh, we didn't use that song, can you give us our money back? We have to buy it.
Yeah.
And so if we get a game, and this happens, people opt for the double or nothing option on Cash Cab Karaoke, and they don't know the song. My thing was, we should get them to sing it once I give them the answer. It'll be rewarding, because karaoke is fun.
Yeah.
Right? Even if you hear people sing horribly, yes, or if you see people on their ride and you're like, wow, they actually can sing, it's amazing. So I was like, for the show, even if they don't know the song, like I ask a trivia question, yes, and they have to sing to prove that they know the answer. And if they're like, oh, we don't know that song, they lose all their money and they have to leave. I'm like, to the production house, to Castlewood, and to the crew, I'm like, let's get them to sing when I tell them because it's so much fun.
Well, that's what happens.
But then we have to pay the royalties, right?
Well, I noticed on the episode I watched, they didn't get the trivia question right, but once you gave them the title, they did sing a bit of the song, which was fun. And, but do they have to sing it exactly word for word, or are they? Can they somehow lose if they start singing it and muff a few words? How does that work?
Well, no, I'm not very strict on the specific lyrics.
Okay.
I make it very clear, and they get the rules in detail as long as I'm very clear that you know the song, right? Yeah. There's some that only knew the chorus, and then for the lyrics in between, they're like da, 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 and boom, and hit the chorus, and I'm like, you know the song, like as long as you get enough of it, because we only have 10 or 15 seconds, so it's fine. I'm not going to say But it's true. It's a fair question because there are times where someone gets a question wrong with, and I can't think of one off the top of my head because I ask thousands of questions, right? Where they get the wording of a question just off on a trivia question, or even when it was on the video bonus, a bit different. I'm not saying the Cash Cab karaoke is easier, but because people are singing and bringing their love and bringing their joy, I want to reward them if they clearly know the song.
Yeah. We're likely then not to hear any Beatles songs, say, or, there's some rights that are just crazy expensive, right?
No, we had quite a wide range. Oh, we wanted to have a real mix. Yeah, for sure. Cool. And some were more expensive than others. True.
Have you ever stopped to give a ride and a famous person got in? Have you ever had a celebrity get in that was kind of a surprise to you or the show?
I've had a couple of occasions where it's been like social media stars or comedians that I'm aware of, or even I've met because we're downtown, we're in the theater district. Yeah. And they're not like global stars. It's not like Biebs is, hailing a cab in Toronto or something. But there's once in a while, there's like, people who are TikTok famous or pop culture famous because they're just getting around town and they end up in the Cash Cab, and it's a lot of fun because they know the deal. They're creators or whatever. There's a lot of those, and then there's comedians on the way to gigs. A lot of people still hail cabs for that way. There was one time, and geez, I don't remember his name now. There was one time I got fan mail after an episode aired, and so it was months later in production. A handful of people get in the cab. Months later, the episode airs, and I get some email from people going, "Did you know you had Rob?" I think it's Rob Snyder, not the actor Rob Snyder, but or not Dee Snyder, but he was a famous Canadian folk artist who, out of my wheelhouse, I didn't recognize him. Right, okay. And he very humble, very kind man, just hailed a cab, got in the back, great fun game, and people said, "Did you realize that he was in the back of your cab?" And I'm like, "Sorry," right? Amazing. Yeah. One of the most famous people is now more famous, is Matt Johnson from Nirvana, the band, the show, the movie. Oh, hilarious. Yeah. Years ago, he and a bunch of friends were in the cab. That's great. On a season from years ago. And so on Reddit now, there's a whole trail because they're super talented, super funny. He and Jay, and the movie's just like huge right now. So people are bringing it up again that he was just randomly in the cab years ago. And I obviously didn't know of him at all back in the day. He's just another comedian trying to slog it out like us, another filmmaker. Well, it would be like when the Bare Naked Ladies were on Speaker's Corner, right? Before they were famous or things like that, Yeah. Cool. That's funny. Has obviously doing this show must have made you more sympathetic to cab drivers and what they have to do in a city, right? Well, I think I've always had that sensibility in terms of people who are providing services, working. I mean, I worked in the restaurant business for many years. I've always kind of saw things from that perspective. So I absolutely would have never been like, oh, wow, I really treated cabbies poorly. It's like, I should have been better tipper. I've always been a better tipper, but I certainly did appreciate a lot more when you think about the people who can make a buck. In the cab business. The drivers are the last ones to make any money. They don't typically own the vehicle. They rarely own the plate. And the plate and the vehicle are the biggest, well, obviously vehicles depreciate. But the plate there's only so many plates in any given city like Toronto.
Right.
So you have to buy the taxi plate, and then someone owns that plate, and they're not necessarily a taxi driver.
Right.
And they just get money from people renting vehicles that are plated. And so cabbies, the drivers themselves, have to rent the vehicle for usually a 12-hour period. They pay X amount of dollars for that, no matter what. So let's call it, $1,000 to rent out a vehicle with a plate on it. And then they got to put all the gas in all the time. And they get obviously what the meter is. It's not like the TV show Taxi from our vintage.
Right.
A lot of people listening won't know the show Taxi. The taxi meter is just a gauge. There's no cut for anybody else. The taxi meter is just an official way to say this is how much this ride is worth.
Yeah.
So the taxi driver gets everything on there plus tips. But they really work hard. And, one thing to think about is if you get a cab in the morning and you're on the way to work and it's 7:00, they might be just ending their shift. They might have been up all night.
Yeah.
And if you're like, oh, he's a little gruff or, didn't really, wasn't like great service, just kind of put it in perspective. Like it might be the end of a 12-hour shift where they've been driving all night trying to make bank.
For sure.
So I do think about that. I never really thought about how long they drive.
Yeah. You mentioned that the sitcom Taxi was back in the 80s. Do you have a favorite character from Taxi?
Oh, Jim.
Played by Reverend Jim, the guy who was Back to the Future, right?
Yeah. And so for me, I even did a little Back to the Future social media hit. We pretended I was Doc from the movie, firing up the cash cab. If you check my socials, if you check Cash Cab Canada,
that's fine.
And so I love the character, and one of my favorite episodes of Taxi was they did a flashback to when he tried pot brownies for the first time in university and became Jim. And you can't see on my face, but it was like the talent of the comedic talent there. Some of the clips from Taxi across the board, it's one of the most evenly well acted and well casted shows, an epic comedy. So I just love
James
Jim,
L.
like
Brooks.
His look, bro.
You got it down. And there could be, you talk about all you're in the comedy world. It would be fun to get 4 comedians in the cab. I could see a celebrity version of Cash Cab. You could probably, you'd have to, pick up people right from Yuck Yucks, I guess, but it would be entertaining. That's for sure. Well,
For me, this was an idea that made sense and still makes sense from way back. And it would be awesome. Like I know Christopher Lloyd and Michael J. Fox have gotten together to reunite, but imagine the two of them, together on Cash Cab. But the only way I think it could work, and I think it could happen, is if we use celebrities, especially some iconic Canadian celebrities, as a shout out option. Because
that's a good idea.
Because people aren't going to believe like I'm randomly driving Blue Rodeo or Jan Arden around, but if on a given night, Jan Arden was your shout out option, like I pick up people, I surprise them. I go, okay, you can use your mobile shout out,
that'd be amazing. Yeah.
Your social media shout out, or you can call Jan and we feed her in on the phone. Or if she happens to be in town, or some, Hudson from Heated Rivalry. Could you imagine people would go nuts? Like if he was on a street corner, I said, okay, on this route, you might have a shout out, but that would cost, right? That would be like more than the royalties for the songs, and they should be paid for their appearance. But I think people would be really blown away by that option and completely surprised.
I think it's a great idea, and I just, I just wrote an obituary for Diana Christie, who was on Party Game. I don't know if you remember that show, but she was on some great TV in the 60s and 70s. And, this Party Game show was just charades. And so it was back in the 70s, and people who were actors in Toronto or all across Canada would just show up to play against the home team. And it was almost like our Tonight Show in that you saw actors and celebrities letting their hair down and being themselves in a casual setting. And so something like a shout out on Cash Cab, it sort of helps with the star system in Canada. Like it keeps their name current and surprising and in a place you didn't expect to see them. So I think it would be a wonderful idea. You know?
Yeah, I think you're right. We had past shows. We don't have a current regular nighttime. There's obviously The Social, where there's opportunities for Canadian celebrities to build their celebrity up, and other news programs. I'm making some appearances on morning and daytime television, but to have a regular opportunity, I talk a lot about this because as a stand-up comedian, I've been working behind the scenes in a not-for-profit where I'm a volunteer on the board for an organization called the Foundation for Canadian Comedy. Wow. And we get intel from comedians from across the country to support what we've all known as artists. And it's not just comedians, but it's certainly stand-up, improv, and sketch comedians who have known this for decades, is that there's a lack of a star system. Mm-hmm. And it's no individual person or industry's fault. It's a combination of the fact that the geography in Canada, the population in Canada, and then therefore the money that can go into the promotional culture of Canadian talent and Canadian shows. And this affects people who are producing shows like Cash Cab and people who are starring on shows like Heated Rivalry or casting those shows. These are limitations. And when you have something that pops and blows the global market limit, like Schitt's Creek and Son of a Critch and obviously Heated Rivalry and Letterkenny and even Cash Cab, which is global. It's a franchise show. And Canada is one of the most successful versions of Cash Cab. There's been a Cash Cab in over 40 different countries. We're one of the longest running, and people are seeing it in other countries. It's nobody's individual fault about the star system. So at the same time, why shouldn't we be doing everything we can to amplify it and put Canadians into the pipeline as opposed to, resisting it? And so I think if I was participating as the host of a show like Cash Cab and contributing to that at the same time and elevating people, and I think maybe we can even do that, because in season 10, you're going to see some people. I was blown away. Like, there are some people who have appeared on other shows that I didn't recognize out of context. And then I talked to them after. It's like, I was on this show or that show, and they can amplify it up because the digital media, the social media side of things still has limitations because of the population of Canada. Right. In terms of how you get noticed, and what the industry jargon is discoverability. So for Canadians to break through, every little bit counts. And if I can participate in contributing to amplifying people through a show like Cash Cab, I love that. I think it's amazing.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that's a great idea. And were these folks on Canadian reality shows like Canada Shores or Big Brother Canada?
I don't know the specific shows, but they would say, oh yeah, like years ago I was on Big Brother Canada, because cool. The culture now is everybody who's a creator or on social media or an aspiring comedian or actor, they do all sorts of different stuff. And so it's very rare, especially when you're driving around in the theater district or the club district of Toronto, that you're not going to pick up people who are kind of in that community, right?
Yeah. Yeah, interesting.
But I have to admit, even though we're talking about amplifying people who want to be stars, some of my favorite contestants over 10 seasons are the people who have no desire to be stars on television, on stage, anywhere, but they love trivia. They don't mind winning a couple of bucks playing a game show. And what I'm really proud of, obviously I'm proud of everybody who's contributed to making Cash Cab over the years, the editors, the DOP, the researchers. I'm really proud of the vibe that people have come to know. They trust me. Now that they've seen the show or heard of the show, they trust that I'm not trying to make fun of them. I'm trying to have fun with them. And even the most introspective and introverted people who have no desire to be on TV are relaxed, and you see their personalities come out on television. And they don't have to be loud, like club, in the street, but they can be, to see someone's authentic smile and laugh on a show, you can't script it. You can't have talented actors can obviously pull it off. But the reality of seeing people just in the pure joy of getting a question right, or even in the, despair of, but the smile of getting kicked out or whatever, it's really quite a joy to watch.
Well, you're a great host. You do a great job on the show. You do put people at ease. I think, you're sort of a sit-down comedian, right?
There you go.
But it is a very fun trip to be riding along as a viewer, and I'm sure it must be great for the people in the cab. And as you say, plus they can leave with cash. That's pretty good. I just wanted to ask before I let you go, and thanks for being so generous with your time, Adam, but do you have any dates coming up? I know you tour. Are you playing just for laughs this summer? Is there something that people can come and see you live?
Well, I do have a lot of corporate gigs, which are not public facing. That's, how I always have, had a lot of work in my career even before Cash Cab. So some of them aren't really promotable. I am in Saskatchewan and this will be, date stamped, but I'm in Saskatchewan for a show on April 17th. And I do a lot more public facing versions of my Adam Growe quiz show. So I've been touring with that for, almost 18 years as well. I started, blending stand-up comedy with trivia on a live show. And it's not like coming to a pub trivia night and watching people play Trivial Pursuit or anything like that. It's a very dynamic comedy show. I do some stand-up. I have quiz games with volunteers from the audience, and they're fun. People are doing stuff like dancing and posing and whatever. So I've got a lot of those coming up, but most of those are private functions. But once we came out of the pandemic a few years ago, I started doing a lot more public facing. And so if you keep track of me at adamgrowe.com, I've got a show listing and I'll put updates up there. But last year I went to Newfoundland for the first time in a long time. I went to Northern Ontario for the first time in a long time. I'm going to Saskatchewan. I did London and Hamilton. I did Niagara Falls recently. And so it's really fun for me to get out and do public facing shows, which I hadn't done a lot of in many years. And because of Cash Cab, I think there's a real passion and desire for just good, high density fun. Yeah. And if I can take that live on stage, I'm happy to do that too.
Perfect. Well, listen, Adam, thank you for your time today. And just a reminder, people, Cash Cab with fabulous karaoke. We're fun at the end, man. It's returning April 22nd on Much, and April 23rd, you can start streaming it on Crave. Adam, thank you very much. Happy driving, and great talking to you today.
Well, I'm glad we could connect. And don't forget the parking brake, Bill. Don't forget the parking brake.
I've never, there's funny, the things you never forget. And oh my God, the lump in my throat, I thought I'd blown it, but you definitely remember that. My thanks again to Adam Growe. Check out the new season of Cash Cab with new episodes Wednesdays on Much and streaming on Crave. Thanks as always to producer Phil Hong for driving this episode directly to its destination. Kudos to BJ Del Conte, Paul Boudra, the Crispy Critters, and Stephen Dudley for the music heard along the way. And finally, thanks to you, listener. If you liked what you heard, please spread the word. I'm Bill Brio. Thanks for listening.